like a bell cut.
Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another Sega Saturn review, with today's game being a 3D weapon-based fighter exclusively released in Japan, developed by Nextech, published by that fantastic company known as Takara. I am of course talking about D-Xhird, or as the box makes it sound like DxHird, which was released in May of 1997. Now, there is a storyline to D-Xhird, and it revolves around the main protagonist, who's simply known as Boy, who is out to gain revenge on an evil cult who assassinated both his mother when he was a young child, and then over 10 years later, his girlfriend. And whilst he knows they're also out to get him too, he doesn't realise it's because an evil ancient spirit resides deep within him, which is simply known as the Shadow. So once the main menu comes around, you'll see you've got a choice of one player mode, versus mode, time limit mode, practice mode, and options. Heading into options, it's all of your standard things. You can change the difficulty, the number of set points, the time limit, the key configuration, the sound between mono and stereo, which is a strange one because every time you turn the game off, it seems to reset back to mono. You can also change the names of the characters, check your records, check the graphics that you've unlocked, and you can also change the wallpaper. So moving on to the character selection screen, you'll see there are 14 characters in total, 10 to start with 4 more being unlockables, and a nice touch is the fact that all of the biographies are displayed in English. So if you are new to my channel, what I do when I review my Saturn games is talk about what they look like, what they sound like, what they play like, their content and lifespan, whether they're still worth playing today, and if they can make our PAL or our worldwide Saturn top 10. Obviously with D-Xhird being a Japan only release, it will be trying to break into my Saturn worldwide top 10. Like always, I'm going to start with visuals first, and I think it'd be fair to say that you wouldn't really be able to criticise D-Xhird in this regard. Now, take into account Nextech had already done Toshinden Remix and Toshinden URA, and whilst Toshinden URA ran in the Saturn's high resolution mode and it did have pretty sharp character models, they do not have the same levels of detail and texture work that we have here in D-Xhird, and the characters look better for it. It gives them a better level of depth visually, and it's much more appealing. Take into account as well the stages here, I think, are much better too. They've improved, and there's more variety because we've got stages that are open and we've got stages that are enclosed, which gives the game more variety. We've got nice effects as well. Some of the stages have got water on them, some of them have got translucent walls, and it genuinely looks pretty decent. Now, the only downside really visually would of course be the mesh effect shadows. They're ugly. I will always say this, you're much better off just going for a dark grey or black shadow on the Saturn because it just avoids that mesh ugliness. Now, of course, the other thing with these Nextech fighting games is that they come across as being jerky and stiff, and D-Xhird is no exception because once again your characters do not feel like they're moving smoothly or naturally. It doesn't matter whether you're pulling off a combo or a single hit attack, everything just looks stiff, jerky, and kind of rough and unnatural, and that for me is the main criticism in the visual department. So moving on to the sound effects and music next, and I don't think you'd be able to give any criticism for Nextech for the quality of the music that they'd put out in their previous Toshinden games on the Saturn, because I felt both of those games had pretty good soundtracks, although perhaps some of the tracks weren't necessarily suited to the fighting style of the game. They were good nonetheless. What D-Xhird does is actually give you a more fitting soundtrack throughout the whole of the game, and it's actually pretty good quality stuff as well. We've got a variety of rock music and then some more lighter, more oriental themed musics, and they all fit the stages very well, and there is nothing here that is terrible. It's perfectly fine to listen to and to play along to. In terms of the quality of the sound effects, they're not the best because they've got that little slight muffle to them, making them not as crystal clear as you'd like. There's reasonable variety, but one that you will probably hear the most is the sound of the ching 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 as you block, or the CPU more than likely is blocking all of your attacks, and that does get a little bit repetitive. But overall, I think the game is pretty good in this department, so what I'll do is give you some examples of the musical tracks so you can listen to them for yourselves. So moving on to the gameplay, and we've got a pretty decent control pad layout here. We've got 2 light attacks, 2 strong attacks, a guard, and you can dodge right and left with the L and R triggers. And it's actually fine. I like that kind of control pad layout. It's different to other fighters. Of course, the biggest problem with these Takara released fighting games is the fact that they just aren't responsive enough. Neither Toshinden Remix or Toshinden URA on the Saturn were responsive enough, and neither is D-Xhird. It just feels like it's got that little bit of delay when you're controlling your characters, and whilst you can adapt to it, it simply isn't quick enough and responsive enough in comparison to the other 3D fighters of the time: Virtua Fighter 2, Fighters Megamix, Last Bronx. Or if you're looking at PlayStation games, Tekken 2 and Soul Blade, they're all more responsive, more fluid, and more fun to play because of this. In terms of the amount of moves at each character's disposal, this game is actually a substantial improvement over both the Toshinden games that came out before it, because you've got much more combo-based attacks and more intricate attacks which require D-pad inputs and then button presses. But of course, you'll quickly realize when you're playing the game that the quick combos are far more effective for having success against the computer. They're much quicker to input and can easily interrupt somebody who's trying to go for a more intricate move, which means it gets quite repetitive because you'll be relying on the same moves over and over again. Quickly knocking your computer opponent down with a combo attack before doing a ground attack to hit them on the floor will probably be your recipe for success time and time again. There are a couple more things to point out on the gameplay. You'll notice underneath your health bar is another gauge. This is your block gauge, and as you use the block more and more, it will deplete, and when it fully depletes, you can still block, but you will start to take damage. The other thing is, if you're knocked off the side of a standard arena, if you respond quickly with the D-pad, you can hop back up and prevent yourself from a ring out loss. So these are 2 nice additions to the gameplay. But overall, it remains stiff, jerky, unresponsive, unbalanced, and overwhelmingly repetitive. So moving on to the content and lifespan, and as well as the one-player arcade mode and time attack modes, we've also got a practice mode, which is great because you can go in there, pick a character, and you can actually view all of the moves that your character can do. You may not be able to read what the moves are called, but it does clearly give you the inputs required to pull each move off. So that's nice because you can learn the controls and the special moves for each character. Now, as well as the 4 additional characters that can be unlocked to go with the original 10, we've also got 4 additional modes of play which can be unlocked as well. We've got a team edit mode, which is a 3-on-3 team battle mode for 2 players. We've got a real fight mode, which is again a 2-player mode of play where the first one to knock their character off their feet will win. Health doesn't matter in this mode. You have unlimited health. It's simply a case of knocking your opponent down. We've also got an unlimited mode, which is a survival mode, and we've also got a mini ring mode, which is exactly what it says. shares a battle which takes place in a much smaller arena. So there's definitely things to unlock. The downside is you can probably unlock all the additional characters and the additional modes of play within 1 hour of playing the game. Now, to go with this, we've also got galleries that can be unlocked for each character. Once you complete the game with them, you'll be able to view various bits of artwork for each character, and you'll also be able to view their ending video in the options menu as well. So there is definitely things to unlock, but in terms of a long-term experience, it isn't here, I should say, because of the gameplay just lacking any sort of depth, really similar to the Toshinden games. It does become repetitive, and at most I'd probably say it's the kind of game that you may well play through once with each character so that you unlock everything, and then the likelihood is you probably won't play it any more than that. So like always, that leaves me with my 2 final questions. Is D-Xhird still worth playing today, and can it make our worldwide Saturn top 10? Now, whether it's still worth playing is really going to depend on how much you love your fighting games. If you are a huge fighting game fan who loves weapon-based fighting games, you may well get some enjoyment out of this, even though it is not the most exciting and responsive fighting game to play. It is by no means the worst fighting game on the system. Games like Battle Monsters and Rise 2 spring to mind instantly, and it is definitely superior to both Toshinden Remix and Toshinden URA. That being said, it's by no means got the quality of games like the Virtua Fighter games or Fighting Vipers or Fighters Megamix. Now, does it have the quality to make our worldwide Saturn top 10? It won't come as any surprise when I say no, it doesn't. It's by no means a great game, but at the same time, it's not a terrible game either, and in fact, my opinions of this game have slightly improved after I've invested more time into it. Did anybody out there, though, play D-Xhird when it originally came out in the middle of 1997? Did anybody import it just so they could play it on their Saturn? Let me know with a comment down below. And like always, I'll be back in the near future with another review. Goodbye for now.